schedule sex, and people are kind of like, whoa, oh my God, I'm never scheduling sex. It's going to take all the fun out of it. Like, what do you mean schedule sex? I can't put that in my Google Calendar.
Jenny Keane, hello and welcome back to the Mindful Podcast.
So thank you so much for having me again, Dermot.
I'm so excited. Last time we spoke, you were very heavily pregnant and you were so kind and you came all the way into the studio to do an episode of the Mindful Podcast. How has the last year been?
Oh, it's been amazing. I gave birth. I had my daughter, and we just had the most amazing year. I have to say, we've been very lucky, and my partner and I as well have just we've been thriving. I have to say, like we've been really really lucky with I suppose our journey to with regards to like parenthood, and then also my own journey towards motherhood, and then our own relationship as well, and watching how that has changed and that dynamic. It's just, yeah, I have to say, I have never been more grateful for all of the tools and the education that I have. I just feel like it has served me so much through this
Mm.
transition. And, I definitely can understand how people can find this so challenging, almost like the motherhood journey itself really challenging, but then also the kind of parallel journey of like maintaining a partnership alongside having babies. I can definitely see how those things are challenging, but I've never been more grateful for, I suppose, the tools that I've picked up over the years. Because I really see like I've always known that they worked because I was, teaching them, and people were like, these are, yeah, they're working for me. So I've always known that, but then actually learning how to apply them has just been a real eye opener of like, oh yeah, God, I'm so lucky, that I was able to have this time beforehand to go into. I think a lot of people, transition into motherhood or into parenthood, and that's when they suddenly start asking these questions.
Mm.
Like how do I take care of myself? How do I become a mother, but then also take care of my own identity in that as well? Like these kind of really important questions of like learning how to maintain yourself and also take care of yourself, learning how to ask for help. Oh, such a big thing.
Mm. Well, communication is at, I think, the foundation of so much of what you talk about. And I think it's at the foundation of what we're going to talk about today. I've been living in the world of busyness and researching it for the last year for my book and live shows. And I can see I've learned the toll it can take on so many aspects of our lives. But what effect is chronic busyness having on our love and sex lives?
Mm. Oh, that's such a big topic. I mean, I think we're living in a society that is unfortunately, overstimulated. It's all about production. And I think I spoke about this last time, but maybe even in this context, it's so important to repeat again. I always talk about it's like the foundation level of everything that I teach, which is called the pleasure mindset. And you understand it best in opposition to the productivity mindset, which really says that in our culture it values productivity, right? And if you look at your world and how your life plays out, we are valuing making goals and attaining those goals. And I always like to say it's not a bad thing to have goals, and it's not a bad thing to pursue those goals. But when you are doing it to the detriment of everything else, the detriment of your well-being, to the detriment of your health, to the detriment of the relationships around you, to the detriment of the things that are also important in your life, like your hobbies and the things that you enjoy to do just because they bring you pleasure, then this is when the productivity mindset becomes a really big problem. And it's something that you have to acknowledge and have to look at.
Mm.
I like to say like that there's this idea that we'll either keep going, keep going, keep going, and then we're going to get the message, right? Like something's going to be talking to us in the background. And if we don't listen to that message, we will be broken in some way, right? Something will break down. It's like a car part. Like if we keep hearing it, the lights keep flashing, and they keep saying like, fix this, and oh, this part needs a little bit of attention, and we don't give that attention, eventually the car will break down. Our bodies are the exact same way. And so I always like to tell people, like, if you look at your sex life, the way that we approach our sex life very much has this productivity mindset attached to it as well, which says, if you aren't producing orgasms, if you, whether that's you're having them yourself or you're giving them to your partner, right? Then you are not worthy or less valuable or not good, right? In some way, because a good, valuable member of society is producing for society, right? And so again, it seeps into our sex lives. And then also, for people who are on the IVF journey or on their fertility journey, if you're not producing a baby, then suddenly again, it's those same messages. We're not worthy. There's something wrong with us. I'm broken. We're broken. Are we supposed to, like, there's all these messages, right, that we get as a result of this. So learning how to put pleasure back at the center of your life is important, not just for your sex life, but for your entire life, right? And if you were to look, and oftentimes when I say this, people are like, oh, that's not me, or I don't have a problem with that. But I say, like, okay, go off now and look at your life for the next week. Don't change anything. Don't do anything different. And you will find the way that the productivity mindset is so insidious and really kind of seeps into like all these aspects, right? Like if when you're making dinner, and even if you're like trying to get the kids out for school, you're in a rush. You're like trying to do everything. You're packing the lunch bags, you're going, going, going. And you miss those little moments, right? Of where there's something funny happening, or, one of your children is trying to tell you a joke and you're like, I don't have time for your jokes right now. I'm trying to get everyone out the door to school. Um, I was speaking to a woman a couple of weeks ago. She has a startup business. It's doing really, really well. And she was saying and she has a young baby, and she was saying to me, I find it so hard to just sit on the ground and play with them because I feel like I need to be doing something. And in my head, I'm saying, like this is worthless. Like what's even happening? Like this isn't going to give me anything. I'm not going to get anything from it. And I'm just like, oh, like that is like the pleasure or the productivity mindset at play big time there. And when you learn how to put pleasure at the center of your life, we know that all systems, right, our cardiovascular system, our respiratory system, our immune system function better with pleasure in them, right? When you can go for a walk, and instead of going for a walk and checking your emails at the same time, because we're trying to, you know, check things off the list and be productive, right? If you could just go for a walk and you look at nature, or just enjoy this, breathing at the same time as moving your body, right? And where you're not counting your steps, right? Again, productivity mindset to a point, right?
Yeah, I know.
Like,
Yeah.
you like look at all of the ways that we're constantly trying to make our lives more productive, and we are at the same time taking pleasure away from those moments that we could really have. And as I said, pleasure fuels our entire body. And interestingly, when pleasure is alive and in our system, we find that we have more energy to do the things that we need to do in order to attain our goals in the
Mm.
first place. So it's this really beautiful kind of I don't know, full circle moment when you learn how to put pleasure back at the center of your life again.
I was looking at a course that you have now, Keeping the Spark Alive, and I think it ties beautifully into what we're talking about today. And I'd love to just drill down into some of the topics and headings you have in there, because I think they're just right on point. So, um, you talk a little bit about mismatched libidos. So I think
Mhm.
that can be an issue for a lot of couples, particularly if when the busyness takes over, one person might really need intimacy to sort of get through the busyness. And the other person might be just, look, I can only get around to that when I've ticked off all the things on my mental to-do list. Don't be coming at me. So,
Yeah.
what do we do if you're in a couple and for whatever reasons you're feeling that there's a mismatched libido, or mismatched desire when it comes to passion?
Yeah. So this is such a big topic. So first of all, I think under having the education behind you is really important, because when you have the education behind you, you understand exactly what pathway to choose when it comes to your options. And if you're experiencing this, you have so many options, first of all. So understanding the difference between, you mentioned desire and libido, right? So desire, libido, and arousal, these are actually different things in the world of sexology. So libido would be something that is indicative of your overall wellness, right? So if you are sleeping well, if you are eating well, if you are moving well, like for your body, right? So you're not doing doing too much and you're not doing too little. Okay. It's the perfect balance. Then your libido is more than likely going to be functioning well. Okay. Now we have all of these outside influences as well that really affect how our libido operates. Stress is a huge one of those. There was this really interesting study done that says 40% of men and women experience issues with their libido. But when you actually take the sample of people and you took stress out of their life, that actually reduced to 3% for men, 6% for women. So you can see the numbers drop.
Mm.
So learning how to manage your stress levels daily is a really important thing because, as I said, your overall well-being is indicative of your libido. We have other things as well that might affect your libido, and they would be things like chemical stress or hormonal stress. So we know if we're taking, let's say, for example, anti-anxiety or antidepressant medication, these are really big questions that I get a lot now from people, and it's even people who are on medication for ADHD. I'm getting way more questions about this. When you find that these medications are causing an issue with your libido, is there's really very simple protocols that you can work towards. And again, they're all about, first of all, managing your own stress levels daily. So whatever that is that works for you, and whether it's like taking half an hour to read or go for a walk or go to the gym, doing these things that we know that are good for our wellness, but then also learning how to focus on arousal. So instead of thinking about my desire, right, or I have a low libido or whatever, a high libido, you're thinking about arousal instead. And arousal is something that works in and through the body. So this means that even if you don't have an urge for sex or an like a kind of that urge, right, to bring you towards your partner, oftentimes focusing on arousal, so the things that really turn you on, can help to stimulate that environment in the first place. And then desire, then we could kind of go into that in a more detail, but probably that's a workshop in and of itself. And then desire, when it comes to desire, there's a couple of different things. So we have different desire responses. We also have different desire styles. And I think understanding this education is really important because, again, it kind of gives you pathways to kind of move towards each other when you are experiencing this disconnection, right? Like, let's say a mismatched libido. So sometimes people who experience mismatched libido are actually experiencing two different desire responses. So we have the spontaneous desire response and the responsive desire response. Spontaneous desire is often in the beginning of the relationship. It's the one that shows up, right? It doesn't really need too much, right? It's kind of like you're looking at your partner, you think about sex, and then oof, suddenly the urge is there, the environment doesn't matter, the environment, you're just like, we're ready for it, right? And in the beginning of a relationship, that's really it's really present, right? Because you don't know this person, everything is new about them, the stories that they tell, the way that they eat food, like everything is so new, the way their body moves, the way they respond when you kiss them. So these things are all really exciting, and you're in that kind of sense of discovery and exploration mode in that moment as well. The other type of response is responsive desire, and this means that in order to have the urge and the feeling that you want to have sex, there has to be some kind of outside stimuli. Okay, so that means, for example, say you come home, you're ready for sex, and you look at your partner and you give them a little eyebrow raise, and you're like, hmm? And they're like, yeah, no, like that's not going to work for me, right? Because there's no outside stimuli happening there, right? There's been no build up, there's no lead. And then this is where it's really important to understand turn on triggers, right? So turn on triggers are going to help you, um, I suppose, choose the right path towards your partner. Okay. So for example, there's a few different desire styles, but if we talk about two of them, so one of them would be direct desire style. So this means that in order for me to be turned on, I need a direct approach. So for example, for a direct desire style, that kind of look across at your partner, with the little eyebrow raise might actually work, right? There's this suggestion behind that. If that came along with a text message earlier on in the day that said, I cannot wait to get home tonight, this is what I'm going to do, right? That's again direct desire, or coming into your partner and saying, you look so hot right now, blah blah blah. So there's this like direct desire that's happening. Um, For some people, that can be a complete turn off, right? So knowing what works for your partner is really important. For some people, they might like, there's another desire style kind of called the cat and mouse. And this is like a game, right? This is a chase. So this is like, I'm going to come towards you and then I'm going to push you away, right? And then you're going to come towards me and then I'm going to push you away. So there is this tension that people are creating in that. And, this often happens when you're dating as well. And if you know that you have what kind of desire style you have or a turn on trigger you have, you can communicate that with your partner. So, for example, I have a direct desire style. I do not in any way, shape, or form enjoy the cat and mouse chase. It gives me anxiety. Like, even when I was dating, if someone was trying to like be, cat and mouse with me, like I was like, no, I'm not here for this. Like, I have not got time, for this. I want to know, do you like me after a date? I want to know if you want to see me after that. And I want that in one text message or I want that in one phone call. I don't want a little coy, kind of thing here or there, right?
Mm,
But some people really enjoy that kind of tease, right? Like that kind of it gives them that kind of sense of excitement. It gives me anxiety. So I was able to say to people when I was dating, sorry, look, this thing you're doing doesn't actually work for me, but like I really appreciate a direct approach with things. And like then people were able to get on my level, or else they weren't, right? Because maybe they needed that cat and mouse stimulation as well. And I'm just
mm.
not there for that.
But do you
Um,
find though that, couples, and I guess especially considering the last year, well, of motherhood and the new baby and all, do you find that people go, look, I get Jenny, I get what you're saying, and I really want to find out what my turn on triggers are, and you know, my create my desire database, as you call it.
yeah.
But the kids are screaming, sandwiches need to be made. Like we barely see each other. I barely have the energy to get the dinner on, and then we're collapsing into bed. How am I meant to find the time and energy to do this? It seems on paper amazing, but our
Yeah.
lives are so busy, we're like exhausted ships passing in the night.
Absolutely. And this is a very real thing for people. But the
Hmm.
but the thing is that if you have the groundwork done, it means that you're cutting out all the stuff that you don't actually need. So if you
Gotcha.
know, for example, that your partner has a responsive desire style and you know that their turn on trigger is having they have an environmental turn on trigger, which means the room needs to be clean, or wherever you are, it needs to be clean. It means that if there's laundry piled up on a chair in the corner, it means that, if the room is a mess, there's kids' toys all over the ground. This is not going to be a conducive environment for them to want to have sex, right? Even if they have
Hmm.
the energy for it. So oftentimes this is the groundwork that needs to be done first, and then you look at your energy levels, right? So then, for example, when it comes to energy levels, there are certain things that you can follow. So one of the big things I would say is schedule sex. And people are kind of like, whoa, oh my God, I'm never scheduling sex. It's going to take all the fun out of it. Like, what do you mean schedule? I can't put that in my Google Calendar. And the problem is that, when you're hopefully it's not attached to work, and you might have some issues. Um, but the problem is that when you are busy, right, you're trying to look at ways that you can become efficient, which is important, but still maintain connection. And I always have this thing like it's like I have a case, like I will put forward a case for scheduled sex and show you that it can be just as fun, just as exciting, and also feel just as spontaneous, even though you've circled it in the diary, right? And like that's that idea that oftentimes when we're going on holidays, we don't think like, oh, I've got a bit of time tomorrow for the next 3 days. Let's go on holidays with all the kids. You don't do that. You will plan months in advance. You sit down and you say, right, where are the best flights? Where can I get cheap flights? Where can I get what's a good hotel? Like you don't land in the airport and go, where are we going to stay, guys? Where do you think what's a good hotel, right? You have that plan beforehand. You generally know what restaurants might be good to go to. You might have some ideas for adventures that you might want to do along the way as well. And when you get on that holiday that has been planned for months, you don't think, Jesus, this is a shite holiday because I know what to expect. You're really looking forward to it. You have created space and time where work is not not invited into that space where extracurricular things that are taking up your time at home are not invited into that moment in time where you're on your holidays. And as I said, like you have, looked at the adventures that you're going to go on. And what's very interesting is that again, when you're on holidays, you're really in this like exploration and discovery mode, which means that you might say, hey, let's go on this hike. And at the end of the hike, you'll decide whether it was a good hike or a bad
Mm.
hike, right?
Do
Or
you find that people maybe feel like if when you say scheduling sex, that it almost triggers a little bit of anxiety because you're thinking, well, what if, for example, like I know my partner is gagging for it, and if I schedule sex, let's say, okay, 7 p.m. on Wednesday, or we're gonna do it. And what if I get to that point and I still don't want it, or I'm not in the mood, or I have to, you know, reject them or push them away, and that just will make things worse,
yeah.
or flip it for the other person. So, do you find that people could be a little bit anxious around scheduling sex because they just feel like it puts them under even more pressure?
Absolutely. And here's the next step in this, right? So I feel like you've done this workshop and you're like doing you're putting giving it in bite-sized pieces for people. But so the first step is learning how to schedule sex, right? And learning that it's okay to do that. It doesn't take the spontaneity away from it. And also as well, it can help build anticipation. So let's say, for example, you just mark it in your diary and you don't and you're on your own. You're like, oh, it's there on Friday. Oh, we haven't spoken about it. Like, what's happening? We don't know. That can add pressure. But if you sit down with your partner and say, like, hey, so you know that thing we have on Friday? I was thinking we could maybe introduce this, or what would you think about like trying this? You start to communicate, and this can build anticipation. It can build excitement, right? The same way that you might do on holidays, right? Like, what do you think about this adventure? What do you think about this? This actually was a really good recommendation on this travel blog, right? Like go and look at sex blogs. Like this is an interesting thing. So the next step then is um and I think it's really important. Again, it's a skill that a lot of people, no one learns, but learning how not to reject, learning how to pivot, right? So let's say, for example, Friday comes, you're not in the mood, you're tired, okay? And you say, like, hey, I know we scheduled sex, but like actually, I just don't really have the energy for it right now. Then you can say either your partner can learn to say, what do you have the energy for, right? Or you can learn to say, I don't have the energy for penetrative sex, but I have the energy for an intimate massage, right? Something that can help relax you, first of all, give you space to relax, give you space and time to get into your body, right? Which is oftentimes what people need in order to feel the urge to have sex. So sometimes after this, arousal can come and actually you might feel that you have the energy for full-blown sex when you learn how to pivot. And so my second thing after scheduling sex would be to learn how to expand your definition of what sex includes, right? So for a lot of heterosexual couples, we think it's just P and V, that's that what sex is. And oftentimes we're following this heteronormative script and it kind of follow the bases, right? So when we have sex, we're starting off with a bit of kissing, might turn into a bit of heavy petting, then we're going to penetrative sex. That's even if you get to the kissing and the heavy petting. A lot of heterosexual couples will go straight to sex where there is no arousal kind of in that environment. There's also no novelty, there's also no discovery and exploration, which can mean that you know what's coming, right? So once you expand your definition of what sex includes, this could be like, you know, does and you have to get very specific for you because this is I always say pleasure is so unique, right? What sex means to you is so unique. So when I say to you like do you define sex as kissing or like do you define sex as a really heavy makeout session? And you might say no to those questions, but if I was to say what about if you were having a makeout section with clothes off? Is that sex? Right? What if you were having a heavy petting session with clothes off? What is that sex? Right? So where is the line for sex? Is sex oral sex? Is sex, so you start to figure out what does sex include? This really helps to relieve the pressure from people around having sex, especially if it's been a couple of years, or maybe they're only having penetrative sex like once every, blue moon. It helps to relieve the pressure and also helps to give them a feeling that like when they do have a kissing session, that it's like, oh, like there we are, like we're having sex, like we're intimate, right? And again, then you'd also want to look at your reasons for having sex, right? So for some people, their reasons for having sex is stress relief, right? For some people, it's because they want to feel connected to their partner, or they feel that they're a really strong team when they're having a regular or a satisfying sex life, right? So it makes them feel together, okay? And for other people, their desire for their motivations for having sex is like to discover and to play and to, have a bit of excitement in their lives and, that kind of thing. Like that's where they're getting their kind of element of mystery and, as I said, excitement. So looking at your reasons for it is also
Mm.
really important. So these are ways
You mentioned
that
the
you
word
can figure.
rejection in there,
Yeah.
and that can be a tricky place because I think if, again, maybe it ties into the mismatched libidos, but if someone is constantly getting a no and maybe they get reasons with the no, or maybe they just get shut down, it can create a bit of resentment, I suspect. How do you help people navigate rejection or deal with it?
So first of all, there's this idea that if you can't say no, can you really say yes? Okay. And this kind of ties into that element of consent. Okay. But also, if you look at I think consent is a really huge, important topic. Okay. But if you were to bring this down to couples, where you assume that consent is a part of the relationship, okay,
Mm.
and you assume that, everyone in the relationship is, wanting to have a great connected relationship where they all feel fulfilled in their own ways. So let's say, for example, when it comes to constantly hearing a no, this kind of ties back to childhood. And if I was to explain this really quickly, right, if when you think about raising kids, and you'll often hear children start to go like no, no, or you'll be saying no, no to children all the time as well. But then after a while, children will
Yes,
start
it was
saying,
my daughter's first word when she was 2. She just banged her fist on the table having dinner one day and said, "No." And
yeah.
she's now 13 and hasn't stopped saying it since. Uh,
Well, it's great. And it's really important to
yeah.
give children a space where they can say no and that no is heard, right? But oftentimes when a child says no, it's like, give me back that toy. No. Then you're like, give me back that toy. And you will often override their no. Okay. So
Mm.
we do this unconsciously all of the time. If a child says, if you say, get in the car, and they say, no, you don't say, hey, like we haven't got time to figure out why you don't want to get in the car. Get in that bloody car, like it's like get in. So again, we're overriding children's no's all the time. Now, what about those children who are learning from a very small age that their no isn't heard, their no isn't valuable, their no doesn't get to take up space, that oftentimes somebody comes in and overrides their no, right? They learn to stop saying no after a while and they become yes people, right? So then we have this kind of huge culture of people pleasers who are then
Mm.
wondering when they're adults, why can't I say no to things? Like my friend tried to call me or called me during work and she's having a meltdown and I actually don't have time for her meltdown right now because I have to get this project in. But here I am sitting on the phone 15 minutes later because I can't tell her, sorry, I'm so sorry you're going through this right now. I don't actually have time for this, but I will give you a call back in a couple of hours when I do have time for it. Or when someone says, hey, do you want to go out? And you say yes because you're just like, I don't know how to say no. And then suddenly it gets to that time, and then you're like trying to think of all these excuses, that you can say, that you can make up so that you don't actually have to do that thing that you want to say no to in the first place. So look at your life. Don't change anything. Look at where every time you want to say no shows up for you and you don't say it. You say something else, right? Or you might sidestep as well. So if we have a huge subculture of people who can't say no, who's hearing no? Who's hearing it? very few people are hearing it. So therefore, when it comes to sex, something that is so intimate, something that is so a part of who you are, I would say your sexuality is intrinsically linked to who you are, how you show up, and how you express yourself in the world. When you put yourself out there and you're vulnerable and you say, hey, I would really love to connect with you. I really want to be intimate. And that person says no. And you are not used to hearing anyone say no to you or anyone say no in society, that no in that circumstance, because it's part of sex now, which means it's a part of you, does something to your core. Like it's like an arrow in your heart and you're being shot down. You're like, whoa, they don't want me. And it's nothing to do with you. It is everything to do with how they feel, right? So instead of thinking, oh, what's going on with them? Like, are they very stressed? Do they need help around the house? Do they need help with kids? Or is there something that's going on that they're not saying to me, right? Instead of these thoughts, we think they don't want me. What's wrong with me? Right. So there's this idea that there's again, it's like, and that's that shame element, right? And then over time, right, if there's someone that's constantly seeking for connection and getting that no in response to that, then it's so understandably, you are going to feel chipped away at. Because as I said, sex is a part of who you are, right? They're chipping away now at who you are. And people do not mean to do this, right? So sometimes there could be something going on. Sometimes it could be that they just don't feel like it. And again, having that education, understanding libido, having stress management practices, all of those things are really, really important. But also doing things like learning how to expand your definition of what sex includes, so that when your partner who there's a bid for connection there, right? When your partner comes to you and wants to connect, you can say, you know what, I'm not in the mood for sex right now, but this is what I am in the mood for. And you find other ways to connect. So even thinking about sexual communication, right? Sexual communication is another skill we don't have, none of us have it. Oftentimes, when we learn to communicate sexually, there's an element of what's happening. We're either shaming or we're blaming, right? So when we say no and we give no other explanation, that person can either feel shame, right? So as I said, that kind of
Mm.
thing we spoke about before, or there's a blame element. Oh, this person never wants to have sex with me. They're always too busy doing this and they're too busy doing that. So that's the blame, right? So we're either taking it into us and it's chipping away at who we are fundamentally, or we're pushing it out because we can't keep it inside of us. We're pushing it out on our partner, which is then causing again that disconnection. Okay. So learning how to pivot is really, really important when it comes to rejection. And again, sexual communication, even keeping that channel open, is learning how is helping you to keep that sexual connection going as well, right? Because if I don't want sex, but I'm talking about why I don't feel like sex right now, we are still having a sexual relationship, right? That makes us feel connected. That makes us feel like we're in it together. Okay. If I'm going through something, there is a study done with men who experience erectile dysfunction. 66% of those men do not want to communicate with their partner. When you do not communicate with your partner, you are not just disconnecting from yourself because you are experiencing a sexual issue, but you are also disconnecting from the partnership and from the relationship, which will make your partner respond in one of two ways, which is that shame or that blame element. So it's so important to learn how to say, this is how I feel, right? This is why we're not having
Mm.
sex. I'm feeling under pressure in work at the moment. I have so much on my mind when it comes to my family, right? Or whatever, learning how to communicate. And then you can do things like I created a game for this very reason, which is like it's called Connect, and they're intimacy cards. And they're questions that you can ask your partner, sexual questions that you can ask your partner. So it's so great for times when you might have mismatched libido, or times when you feel disconnect from each other and don't know how to connect again sexually. These are really great stepping stones because the questions include things like sexually reminiscing. So if I say to you, like, describe our first kiss, right? And this is really important that both partners are really in it. So they're not just saying like, oh yeah, it was great. Like they're describing it. There's descriptive language in there, right? Then what you will find is that people feel really connected sexually, right? what was our best sexual experience like from your side, like that you remember? What was your favorite sexual memory, right? These kind of questions are really important. I actually created these cards, Dermot, really funny because I was sent them by other brands and I was like, Jesus, who is writing these questions? Because I was like, these are supposed to inspire intimacy and connection. And, there's a question in there like, what is your body count? And I was like, why do you want to ask that question in this environment? Like that's so weird. Like someone,
What?
obviously a Gen Zer was
That sounds
writing this.
like how many people have you murdered?
Yeah, exactly.
What's your body count?
And sorry, there was another question that I was just I was reading through them and I was like, oh God. And it was describe the best sexual experience you've ever had. Now, all you have to do is ask that to an unsuspecting, I'm going to label you all with the same, tar you all with the same brush for the moment, but an unsuspecting man here who's like going, oh, do you know, there was this amazing girl that I met when I was 20 and oh shoot, we had this great time, right? Because again, the question isn't specific enough, okay? Now, women can do that as well. Obviously, they can, you're in this unsuspecting environment where you feel safe, and suddenly you're just like, oh, I'm just going to answer this question because it's truthful, right? But it's not going to inspire intimacy. That other person on the other side is sitting there listening, going, "Are you fucking kidding me?" Like,
So their most amazing sexual experience was with the wrong person. Was it
like,
another person
yeah,
altogether?
or just like, it's so funny. It's so important to be specific. So like I
Yeah,
have a
yeah.
question in there that's like, describe your most amazing sexual experience with me. It's like these two words at the end. Like
You're
so
like,
um
oh.
yeah, exactly. So, and this is where I say, like, sexual communication is so important, learning that
Mm,
skill. And, we can go in with the best intentions. And unfortunately, when we're learning, saying the wrong thing is a part of it. And sometimes saying the wrong thing can blow it up. So it's nice to have helpful tips,
mm.
I think.
Yeah, but I
So
love the way you do say communication is lubrication, and it just seems to be at the bottom of everything. That if you can just use your words, even if they're a little bit clumsy, then at least you'll keep those lines of communication open. Because I think when it gets closed off, it does create that distance and it's harder to get back into that space. I mean, I do meet a lot of people, I meet people sometimes who say, look, my partner just said, you know what, it's not for me anymore. And that can be really sad, if you think one person just has been that the couple are separated out now from that physical relationship and one person is left going, what do I do now? And they feel like they
yeah.
can't even begin to have that conversation.
Yeah. So there's two things that I want to say about this particular point is that relational satisfaction is not dependent on sexual satisfaction. Okay. But we know that sexual satisfaction within a relationship dramatically increases relational satisfaction. So we know that it's also a really important element. You don't have to have it as part of your relationship, but we know that when it is present and when people are satisfied, it is it is something that can really help to elevate the feelings that you have with your partner. And again, it's not just like that feeling of like, yeah, we're great at sex or whatever, or we're still having a thriving sex life and we've been together for 20 years, right? It's not that feeling of pride, but it's that feeling of like, we're a good team, right? Like we
Mm,
have each other. We're in this together. There's a sense that like they want me and I want them, and feeling wanted and feeling needed. These things are so important to and vital to a relationship, right? Oftentimes I say as well, our sexuality is how we express ourselves as well, right? It's linked to that. So when we're able to have that intimate side of our relationship blooming, we're also expressing ourselves to our partner in a different way, right?
mm,
So but at the same time, there are things that happen in our lives, like where, sex and that part of that connection that we have to our own sexuality is shut down. Again, it's for so many reasons. When you are too much in the productivity mindset, when you're busy and wrecked, right? Like you aren't thinking about sex because think of what happens, right? When we think about survival instincts, if we're finding it hard to fuel ourselves correctly, if we feel like that we're too busy to make proper food for ourselves, and we're constantly grabbing takeaways because we just don't have time, or we're constantly eating out because we just don't have time, and we're not fueling ourselves properly, then our body is going to shut down the mechanisms, the parts of ourselves that it doesn't actually need. Our reproductive system and our desire for sex, right, are linked, obviously, but it isn't, our reproductive system isn't necessary for our survival. So it will shut down, right? If you aren't
Mm.
fueling yourselves, or if you aren't fueling yourself the right way.
So I
If you
guess if you're
feel,
walking around in a high stress state all the time, it's perfectly natural that, you're not going to go, "Oh my God, the village is on fire. I need to have sex."
yeah,
You'll be thinking, "I need to put out these fires." And I
absolutely.
think people are just in that mode of trying to put out their own fires so much of the time that it's just very hard to connect, isn't it, to things that your body is thinking, this is not urgent right now.
Yeah, and again, that goes back to that thing that we talked about, the pleasure mindset. It is so
Mm.
urgent, even though it doesn't feel urgent. It's urgent because at the end of your life, whatever you are busy doing right now, at the end of your life, you aren't going to think about the time when you worked extra nights in work, right? You aren't going to think about that. You are going to think about the times that you came home from work, that you sat with your children, or that you sat with your wife, and you aren't even going to think about the Netflix series that you watched. You're going to think about the times that, like, you played a card game together, right? Or you went for a walk, right? Like, I have this time from 20 years ago. I was working in a really high pressured environment. I was in my early 20s, and I was so stressed with my life. I had no social life anymore because my work required everything. It took everything from me, my entire life from me. And I was sitting there with my friend, and I was like, I just had this realization where I was like, I'm not going to remember the time that I sat here and working on this particular project, but I am going to remember the time that I bunked off work and went to the beach because it was really sunny. And I walked out of work and I went to the beach. Like, I went there with my friend, and I still remember that day. Like, it's, and I'm not condoning that, people walk out of work and don't do your work, right? But I'm saying, like, that was me in a pressure cooker that got to the point where I was like, if I don't do this, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die at my desk, right? But if you were doing things every single day, right? Again, I'm not like a big believer, especially this last year. I've seen it so much, right? I I'm I have a baby. I have a full-time job, like, where I run my own company, right? And I have a partner who I really want to connect with. I have family members who I really want to connect with. I have friends who I want to see, right? So we have all of these things on top of us. I'm not a really big believer in having to have like an hour or 2 hours set aside for you to be making these times to connect with yourself and think of your well-being, right? My moments of well-being are micro moments spread out throughout the day that compound at the end of the day, that compound at the end of the week, that allow me to be able to show up for work, that makes it okay when there's a night that my daughter does not sleep and I am awake for the whole night, and then I have to get on a call at 9 a.m. the next day and still show up for that call, right? Like, those are micro moments that I have compounded because I know how important they are to my overall well-being. What they also do when you have these micro moments of wellness, they are also helping you to stretch your system. And I'm a real believer in this. Like, I'm a big fan of yoga, really big fan of Tantra yoga. And when I teach Tantra yoga, I talk about reaching that point. Like, so we don't, Tantra yoga isn't all about having a great time and you're like, oh, moving with your breath. It's also about creating moments of stress in the body where your body feels stressed, right? And then you come back from that moment of stress and you regulate. And so, what we're doing in those moments is stretching the system so that you're learning how to meet a moment of stress and know that your body can handle it and come back to neutrality. You meet another moment of stress, your body can handle it and come back to neutrality. And it's that feeling of stretching these moments, like, or stretching these sensations and these experiences that we all have, so that we can meet them and then come back to, feeling okay and feeling regular. And when we have those micro moments spread out throughout the day, they are helping us to meet those moments of meet those moments of stress, meet those challenges, and come back to ourselves again. And as I said, those are the things that are going to help you want to connect with yourself, but also connect to your partner and also want to have sex again if that's something that you're not having, you know? I
Mm,
think it's so important. Like, when people talk about having stress management practices all the time, and I'm a real fan of like talking about having them, but also making them work for your life. 10 years ago, when I had no responsibilities whatsoever, my yoga practice was 4.5 hours long, at least. And I was having a grand old time. But nowadays, like that is not feasible for my life anymore. So you make it work for you.
mm. I love it. So much of it comes down to just prioritizing things that aren't the busy, 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 go, go, go. And whether it's, our sense of peace, our sense of calm, our sense of joy, our sense of pleasure, you know, your sex life, whatever it happens to be, it just comes down to realizing that what I say is that busyness is like water. It will flow into all the spaces we allow it to. So unless we safeguard those little mini spaces, as you say, those micro moments, I talk about mini moments as well in terms of mindfulness and just being present. Like unless we do that, the busyness will flow in. I've loved our conversation. Thank you so much. I highly recommend people go and check out your website. Are you jennykeane.com or is it now oh my
It's omoment.com. So
oh oh
oh-moment.com.
ohmoment.com?
JennyKeane.com is still working, but it's more to direct people to O Moment. So I've expanded out, into a brand. I have
Mm,
an online sex toy shop and I do in-person events, so three different types, and there's another event, like another type of event starting this summer for people who want to kind of go in depth with different sex skills, like spanking or BDSM or rope play and all that kind of stuff. And I basically was like, I need to put this under a name that isn't my own anymore. I also am bringing in other educators as well because I don't know absolutely everything. So it's important, so I've started to do that. So yeah, it's under that, but you'll
mm.
find me under jennykeane.com as well. You'll
Mm.
just be redirected to the other website.
Well, I think there's so many wonderful courses up there, and people can go in and have a look around. And if they check out, I guess, aligned to what we were talking about today, you're keeping the passion. Is it keeping the passion alive?
Keeping the spark alive.
Keeping the spark alive,
Yeah.
and they can find out lots of what we were talking about today more in depth, and also something called the fuck it list, which I'm which I'm intrigued to find out about, but they'll have to go and do the course to find out. Jenny King, thank you so much for talking to me on the Mindful podcast. That was a really, really great conversation. I think people will get so much from it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me again. And congratulations on your book. I'm just so excited. I think it's such an important message.
Thank you. Well, I think we're barking up the same tree, I think, and just to try
Yeah,
to get
yeah,
people to appreciate the stuff that matters, and those
absolutely.
generally aren't Teams meetings, as much as time we give to those things. Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you so much, Dermot.